Prince George Aldrinvec stood at the window of his bedroom and looked down at the planet below. New Britannia was beautiful from up here. The blue oceans and green lands looked peaceful. 3 billion people lived down there, and one day he would rule them all. But right now, he was just a 17-year-old boy trapped in an orbital palace made of glass and steel. The Royal Orbital Palace floated high above the world. It was the most secure place in the entire star system. Guards walked every hallway. Cameras watched every room. George had lived here his entire life, and sometimes he felt like a bird in a very expensive cage. His mother, Queen Serena, said the palace kept him safe. She said there were bad people who wanted to hurt the royal family. She reminded him often about what happened to his father, King Marcus, who died when George was just a baby. Rebels had killed him, she said, terrorists who hated the monarchy. George had no memories of his father, only pictures and old video recordings. In those recordings, King Marcus smiled and laughed. He held baby George in his arms and made funny faces. He looked like a man who loved his family very much. George wished he could remember him. His relationship with his mother was different. Queen Serena was not cold exactly, but there was always a distance between them. When she hugged him, it felt formal. When she smiled at him, it never quite reached her eyes. George had always thought this was because she was the queen. She had so many responsibilities, so many worries. She could not be a normal mother because she was not a normal person. But sometimes, late at night, George wondered if there was another reason. Today was his 17th birthday. There had been a formal celebration with hundreds of guests from across human space, politicians, military officers, business leaders, and nobles from a dozen colony worlds. They all came to shake his hand and wish him well. They all looked at him like he was something valuable, something important. George hated it. After the party ended, he returned to his room and sat at his computer terminal. He was supposed to be studying for his exams, but he could not focus. His mind kept wandering to the same questions that always bothered him. What was his father really like? What did he believe in? What did he fight for? The official history said King Marcus was a great leader who expanded human territory and brought peace to the frontier worlds. But they were just words. George wanted something real, something personal. He began searching through the palace archives. He had done this many times before, looking through old records and documents. But tonight, something strange happened. His search query returned a result he had never seen before. A folder marked with his father's name, hidden deep in the system. George clicked on it. The screen flashed red, Access denied, Level 7 clearance required. George frowned. He had Level 5 clearance, which should give him access to almost everything in the archive. What could possibly require Level 7? Only the Queen herself had that level of access. He tried a different approach. He had learned some computer skills over the years, mostly out of boredom. He knew a few tricks that the palace technicians probably did not expect a prince to know. After 20 minutes of careful work, he found a back door into the restricted section. His heart was beating fast. He knew he should stop. He knew this was wrong, but he could not help himself. The folder contained hundreds of files, medical records, communication logs, security footage, and something called Project Mirror. George opened the first file. It was a video recording, dated 2 days before his father died. King Marcus was sitting in his private office. He looked tired and scared. His hands were shaking as he spoke to the camera. "If you are watching this, then I am probably dead. I have discovered something terrible, something that threatens not just our family but all of humanity. Serena is not." The screen went black. An alarm began to sound. Red lights flashed throughout the room. George jumped back from the terminal, his heart pounding. He had triggered some kind of security alert. Within seconds, guards burst into his room. They looked around with weapons drawn, searching for threats. When they saw George standing alone by his computer, they relaxed slightly. "Your Highness," the lead guard said, "the system detected a security breach in your room. Are you all right?" George forced himself to stay calm. "I'm fine. I was just studying and the computer crashed. Must have triggered a false alarm." The guard nodded, but George could see suspicion in his eyes. "We'll have the technicians check the system, Your Highness. Please try to get some rest." After the guards left, George sat on his bed and tried to think. What had his father been trying to say? Serena is not what? Not trustworthy, not safe, not human. That last thought made him shiver. Hours passed. George could not sleep. He kept thinking about the video, playing those few seconds over and over in his mind. His father had looked so frightened. What could possibly scare a king? Around midnight, there was a soft knock at his door. George tensed. No one should be visiting him at this hour. "Who is it?" he called out. "Commander Thorne and Lieutenant Venn, Your Highness. We served with your father. We need to speak with you. It is urgent." George hesitated. He knew those names. Thorne and Venn were decorated veterans, heroes of the frontier wars. They had been loyal to his father until the end. After the king died, they had requested positions in the palace guard. George had always wondered why such accomplished soldiers would want such a boring assignment. He opened the door. Commander Elias Thorne was a tall man with gray hair and a face marked by old scars. Lieutenant Sarah Venn was younger, with sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. They both looked nervous, which was strange for people who had faced death many times. "May we come in, Your Highness?" Thorne asked quietly. "What we have to say cannot be heard by others." George stepped aside and let them enter. Thorne checked the room carefully, then pulled out a small device and activated it. "This will block any listening devices for a few minutes," he explained. "We don't have much time." "What is this about?" George asked. Thorne and Venn exchanged a look. Then Thorne reached into his jacket and pulled out a small crystal that glowed with soft blue light. "We've been watching you for a long time, Your Highness," Thorne said, "waiting until you were old enough, until you were ready." "Ready for what?" Lieutenant Venn stepped forward. Her voice was gentle but serious. "Ready to learn the truth about your father's death and the truth about your mother." George felt cold. What truth? Commander Thorne pressed the crystal into George's hand. It was warm against his skin. "Everything you have been told is a lie," Thorne said. "Your father was not killed by rebels. He was murdered because he discovered something so dangerous that it cost him his life." George stared at the crystal. Inside it, he could see thousands of files waiting to be read. Evidence, proof, truth. "What did he discover?" George whispered. Thorne looked at him with sad eyes, eyes that had seen too much pain, eyes that did not want to cause more. "Your mother, Prince George, the woman who raised you, the woman who sits on the throne." He paused and took a deep breath. "She is not human. She has not been human for a very long time. And the real Queen Serena, we believe she died many years ago." The crystal almost slipped from George's fingers. His whole world was falling apart. Everything he knew, everything he believed, everything he thought was real. It was all a lie. And somewhere in the palace, a creature wearing his mother's face was waiting for him. George sat on his bed with the data crystal in his hands. Commander Thorne and Lieutenant Venn stood before him, their faces grim. The words they had spoken hung in the air like poison. "Your mother is not human." "That's impossible," George said. His voice was shaking. "I've lived with her my entire life. She raised me. She held me when I was sick. She taught me how to be a prince. How can she not be human?" Thorne knelt down so he could look George in the eyes. "I know this is hard to believe, Your Highness. I didn't believe it either, not at first. But your father found the proof. And when he confronted her, she killed him." "She wouldn't," George started to say, but the words died in his throat. He thought about all the times his mother had felt strange to him, All the moments when her smile seemed wrong. All the nights when he caught her staring at him with eyes that held no warmth. Lieutenant Venn spoke softly. "Have you ever heard of the mirror kind, Your Highness?" George nodded slowly. Everyone knew about the mirror kind. They were a species from beyond the outer reach, the unexplored edge of human space. First contact had happened about 50 years ago. The mirror kind were shapeshifters. They could change their appearance to look like any humanoid species. They could copy faces, voices, even mannerisms. But they were supposed to be peaceful. They traded with human colonies. They had signed treaties and agreements. They were allies, or at least they pretended to be. "The mirror kind are not what they seem," Venn said. "For decades they have been placing infiltrators in positions of power throughout human space. They replace important people with their own agents, politicians, military leaders, business executives, and royalty." George felt sick. How long has she been replaced?" Thorne sighed heavily. "We don't know exactly. Your father believed it happened sometime after you were born. The real Queen Serena loved you very much. She would hold you for hours, singing songs and telling stories. But then, slowly, things changed. She became distant, cold. Your father noticed, but he thought it was just stress from her duties." "When did he find out the truth?" "About a week before he died. He had started investigating strange communications coming from the palace, signals being sent to coordinates in empty space. He tracked them back to the Queen's private terminal. When he confronted her," Thorne's voice broke. "We heard the screaming. By the time we broke down the door, it was too late." George closed his eyes. He tried to remember his father's face from the video he had found, the fear in his eyes, the trembling in his voice. "Serena is not." Now he knew how that sentence ended. "Serena is not human." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" George asked. "Why didn't you expose her?" "We tried," Venn said bitterly. "We reported what we saw to military command. We were told to keep quiet. Our evidence was destroyed. Our reports were deleted. We were told that if we ever spoke of this again, we would be charged with treason." "The conspiracy goes deeper than just New Britannia," Thorne added. "The mirror kind have agents everywhere, in the Federation government, in the military, in intelligence services. Anyone who discovers the truth either disappears or is silenced." George looked at the crystal in his hand. "But you kept the evidence." "Your father gave it to us the night he died. He knew they would come for him. He made us promise to protect you and to give you the truth when you were old enough to handle it." Thorne placed his hand on George's shoulder. "That time is now, Your Highness. You triggered a security alert tonight. The false queen will know you were looking at restricted files. She will start asking questions." "What do you want me to do?" Venn stepped forward. "Look at the evidence. See for yourself. Inside that crystal is everything your father gathered. Medical scans showing that the Queen's cellular structure doesn't match human DNA. Communication logs showing messages sent to mirror-kind space. Recordings of her speaking in frequencies that no human throat can produce." George activated the crystal. Holographic images appeared in the air before him. Charts and graphs and data streams. Video recordings and audio files. It was overwhelming. The first thing he looked at was a medical scan. It showed two images side by side. On the left was a scan labeled Queen Serena Year 12. On the right was a scan labeled Queen Serena Year 15. The difference was clear even to George's untrained eyes. The cellular patterns were completely different. The DNA markers didn't match. Whatever creature was scanned in Year 15, it was not the same being that was scanned in Year 12. "The switch happened between those scans," Thorne explained. "Your father found this buried in the medical archives. Someone tried to delete it, but he recovered it." George watched a video recording next. It showed his mother in her private chambers, alone, speaking into a communication device. The words she spoke were not in any human language. They were clicks and whistles and strange harmonic tones that made George's ears hurt. Subtitles appeared at the bottom of the screen. Infiltration proceeding as planned. The heir remains unaware. Request further instructions regarding timeline for Phase 2. Phase 2, George whispered. What is Phase 2? We don't know exactly, Ven admitted. But we've gathered intelligence from other sources over the years. The Mirror kind are preparing something big. They've been positioning their agents for generations. We believe they plan to take control of human civilization from within. No invasion, no war, just a quiet replacement of everyone who matters. George felt anger rising in his chest, not just at the creature pretending to be his mother, but at the entire situation. His father had died trying to expose this conspiracy. Good men and women had been silenced for speaking the truth, and all this time, humanity had no idea that it was being slowly conquered. Why keep me alive? George asked. If she's not really my mother, why didn't she just kill me too? Thorne's face darkened. Because you're valuable, you're the legitimate heir to the throne. Your DNA proves you're the son of King Marcus. As long as she has you, she has legitimacy. She can rule through you, control you, use you. And what happens when she doesn't need me anymore? No one answered. They didn't need to. George stood up. His legs felt weak, but his mind was clear. He had spent his whole life being protected and sheltered. He had been told that the palace was the safest place in the system, but it wasn't safe at all. It was a trap, and the monster at the center of the trap wore his mother's face. I need to confront her, George said. Thorne shook his head quickly. That's too dangerous, Your Highness. If she knows that you know, she might. She's going to find out anyway, George interrupted. You said so yourself. She'll know I was looking at the restricted files. She'll start investigating, and when she realizes how much I've learned, she'll either control me or eliminate me. He looked at the two soldiers who had risked everything to tell him the truth. I need to see it for myself. I need to look her in the eyes and know that what you're telling me is real. Ven nodded slowly. Then we'll be ready to get you out. We have a shuttle hidden in the maintenance bay. If things go wrong, run to us. We'll be waiting. George put the crystal in his pocket. It felt heavy, like it was pulling him down, but it also felt like hope. For the first time in his life, he understood why he had always felt alone, why he had never truly connected with his mother, why something had always seemed wrong. Because it was wrong, all of it. He walked to the door and paused. What happened to my real mother, the real Queen Serena? Thorne's voice was full of sadness. We don't know, Your Highness, the Mirror kind. When they replace someone, they need to study them first, learn their memories, their habits, their personalities. Some of the victims are kept alive for a while, locked away somewhere while the infiltrators perfect their disguise. But most. He didn't finish the sentence. George opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The palace was quiet at this hour. Most of the staff and guards were asleep. The perfect time for a prince to have a private conversation with his mother. His mother, who wasn't his mother at all. George walked toward the Queen's chambers, his heart pounding with every step. He was about to face a monster. He was about to confront a creature that had stolen his family, his throne, and his entire life. And he had no idea what would happen next. The Queen's private chambers were at the top of the palace. George walked through empty corridors lit by soft blue light. His footsteps echoed on the polished floors. Every step brought him closer to the truth. Every step made his heart beat faster. He thought about what he would say. How do you accuse your mother of not being your mother? How do you tell someone they are a monster wearing a stolen face? Two guards stood at the entrance to the royal chambers. They looked surprised to see the prince at this hour. Your Highness, one of them said, the Queen has retired for the night. Is something wrong? I need to speak with her, George said. He tried to keep his voice calm. It's urgent family business. The guards looked at each other. They seemed uncertain, but George was the prince and they could not refuse him. We'll inform Her Majesty that you wish to see her, the first guard said. A few minutes later, the doors opened. George stepped inside. The Queen's chambers were beautiful. Rich fabrics covered the walls. Expensive furniture filled the rooms. Artwork from a dozen worlds decorated every corner. It was the home of the most powerful woman in the star system. Serena was sitting by the window, looking out at the stars. She wore a simple robe and her dark hair was loose around her shoulders. When she turned to face George, she smiled. "George, darling, what brings you here so late? You should be sleeping." George studied her face. He had looked at that face every day of his life. He knew every line, every curve, every expression. But now he saw it differently. Now he was looking for the monster underneath. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "I've been thinking about Father." Something flickered in Serena's eyes. It was quick, almost too fast to notice. But George saw it. A tiny moment of calculation, a predator assessing its prey. "Your father was a great man," Serena said softly. "I miss him every day." "Tell me about him," George said. "Tell me about the night you first met." Serena smiled again. "Oh, that was so long ago. We met at a diplomatic reception on Earth. I was just a minor noble's daughter and he was the crown prince of New Britannia. He asked me to dance, and I was so nervous I nearly stepped on his feet." George nodded. This was the story he had always been told. It matched the official history exactly, word for word. "What song was playing?" he asked. Serena's smile froze for just a moment. "What do you mean?" "When Father asked you to dance, what song was playing? He used to tell me about it when I was little. He said it was your song, the one you danced to at your wedding." George watched her eyes carefully. He saw her thinking, searching through memories that weren't really hers. The real Serena would have known the answer instantly. It would have been one of her most precious memories. "It was so long ago," Serena said finally. "I can't quite remember the name. Something classical, I think." "It was called Starlight Waltz," George said. "Father wrote it himself. He composed it just for you. He told me that story 100 times." Serena's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. A coldness crept into her gaze. "Of course, the Starlight Waltz. How silly of me to forget." But she hadn't remembered. She had waited for George to give her the answer, then pretended she knew it all along. George asked more questions. Where did they go on their honeymoon? What was George's first word? What did the real Serena call her son when no one else was listening? Each time the creature wearing his mother's face stumbled. Each time she gave answers that were close to the truth but not quite right. She had studied Queen Serena's life carefully. She had memorized the important facts and dates, but she didn't have the real memories. She didn't have the emotions that came with those memories. She was a copy, a fake, a monster in human skin. "You're very curious tonight," Serena said. Her voice had changed. It was harder now, less warm. "Why all these questions about the past?" George felt his hands shaking. He put them behind his back so she wouldn't see. "I found Father's files," he said, "the ones he hid before he died." Serena went very still. For a moment, she looked like a statue carved from ice. Then she stood up slowly and walked toward George. "What files?" she asked. "The medical scans, the communication logs, the recordings." George's voice was getting louder. He couldn't help it. All the pain and anger and confusion was pouring out of him. "I know what you are. I know what you did to my father. I know what you did to my real mother." Serena stopped walking. She was only a few feet away from George now. Her face was calm, but her eyes were changing. They seemed darker somehow, deeper, like looking into a bottomless pit. "Your real mother," she repeated slowly. "What a strange thing to say." "You're not her," George shouted. The words exploded out of him like a bomb. All the fear and doubt disappeared, replaced by pure rage. "You're not my mother, you never were. You're a mirror-kind, a shapeshifter, a murderer." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The silence was so heavy that George could hear his own heartbeat. Then Serena smiled. It was the most terrifying thing George had ever seen. Her face seemed to ripple, like the surface of water disturbed by a stone. Her features shifted and blurred for just a moment before snapping back into place. But in that moment, George saw something beneath the mask, something that wasn't human at all. "Clever boy," she said. Her voice was different now, layered, like multiple voices speaking at once. "Your father was clever too, it didn't save him." George took a step back. "Stay away from me." "I raised you," the creature said, walking toward him. "I fed you, I clothed you, I taught you everything you know. Does that count for nothing?" "You're not real, none of it was real." "Oh, but it was." The creature's smile widened. "I have all of Serena's memories. Every moment she spent with you before the switch, every lullaby, every bedtime story. In a way, I am your mother. I'm the only mother you've ever really known." George felt tears on his cheeks. He didn't know if they were from fear or grief or anger, maybe all three. "What happened to the real Serena?" he demanded. "Is she dead? Did you kill her?" The creature tilted its head, studying him like a scientist studying an insect. "She served her purpose. We needed her memories, her knowledge, her mannerisms. Once we had extracted everything useful, she was no longer necessary." "You murdered her." "We absorbed her. Her memories live on in me. In that sense, she never really died. She just became part of something greater." George felt sick. This thing had consumed his real mother like food. It had eaten her mind and worn her body and pretended to love him for 17 years. "Why?" George asked. "Why are you doing this? What do the mirror kind want?" "We want to survive," the creature said simply. "Our homeworld is dying. Our collective needs new territory, new resources, new hosts. Humanity has spread across so many worlds, occupied so much space. You have everything we need, and you were so trusting, so easy to infiltrate." "People will find out," George said. "They'll fight back." "By the time they find out, it will be too late. We are already in position. Governments, militaries, corporations. We have replaced the people who matter most. When the time comes, humanity will surrender peacefully. They won't even realize they've lost until it's over." The creature reached out toward George. Its hand looked human, but George could see the fingers lengthening, becoming something else. "I kept you alive because you were useful," it said. "Your blood, your DNA, your face. You give me legitimacy. But now that you know the truth, you've become a problem. I can't have you running around telling people what I am." George backed up until he hit the wall. There was nowhere left to go. "Don't worry," the creature said. "I'll make it quick. And afterward I'll tell everyone that you had a mental breakdown, such a tragedy. The stress of being a prince was too much for you." George closed his eyes. He thought about his father, who had died trying to expose this evil. He thought about his real mother, whose memories had been stolen and whose body had been discarded like trash. He thought about all the people on New Britannia who had no idea that a monster sat on their throne. Then he opened his eyes and ran. He ducked under the creature's reaching arm and sprinted for the door. Behind him, he heard an inhuman shriek of rage. He didn't look back. He just ran. The guards at the door tried to stop him, but George pushed past them. He ran through the corridors as fast as his legs could carry him. Alarms began to sound. Red lights flashed. The whole palace was waking up. But George didn't stop. He ran toward the maintenance bay where Commander Thorne and Lieutenant Venn were waiting. He ran toward his only chance of escape. Behind him, the monster that was not his mother screamed for the guards to catch him. The hunt had begun. The shuttle burst out of the palace docking bay with plasma fire chasing behind it. George gripped his seat as Commander Thorne pushed the engines to their limit. Lieutenant Venn worked the weapons console, firing back at the palace defense systems. "Hold on," Thorne shouted. "This is going to be rough." The small ship shook as a blast hit their shields. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. But Thorne was a skilled pilot. He twisted and turned through the debris field around the palace, using old satellites and space junk as cover. Behind them, 3 military fighters launched from the palace hangar. George watched them on the rear camera. They were fast and deadly. The shuttle was not designed for combat. "We won't survive a straight fight," Ven said grimly. "We need to jump to hyperspace." "The engines need 2 more minutes to charge," Thorne replied. "Can you buy us time?" Ven smiled coldly. "I can try." She launched a spread of missiles at the pursuing fighters. The missiles weren't aimed at the ships directly. Instead, they exploded in the space between, creating a cloud of debris and electromagnetic interference. The fighters had to slow down and navigate through the chaos. 2 minutes felt like 2 hours. George watched the fighters getting closer and closer. Any second now, they would have a clear shot. Then the hyperspace indicator turned green. "Jumping now," Thorne announced. The stars stretched into lines, and the shuttle vanished into another dimension. The fighters were left far behind. George let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. They had escaped, but where could they possibly go? "Setting course for Freehold Station," Thorne said, as if reading George's thoughts. "It's a lawless place on the edge of human space. The Queen's authority doesn't mean anything there." "We'll be safe?" George asked. Thorne and Ven exchanged a look. "Safe enough," Ven said, "for now." The journey took 3 days. 3 days of sitting in a cramped shuttle, eating emergency rations and sleeping in shifts. 3 days of thinking about everything George had lost: his home, his position, his whole identity. He wasn't a prince anymore. He was a refugee, a fugitive, a boy whose mother was a monster. But somewhere during those 3 days, something changed inside George. The shock and grief slowly transformed into determination. He had the evidence his father had gathered. He had the truth, and he had 2 loyal soldiers who believed in him. Maybe that was enough. Freehold Station was ugly. It was a collection of old ships and modules welded together over decades, floating in the void between star systems. Every surface was covered in rust and graffiti. Every corridor was filled with criminals, smugglers, and people running from their pasts. It was perfect. Thorne found them a small apartment in the station's lower levels. It was dirty and crowded, but it had thick walls and a secure door. More importantly, no one asked questions. "We need allies," George said on their first night. "We can't fight the mirror kind alone." "I might know someone," Ven said. "A former intelligence officer named Alexei Volkov. He was discharged from Federation intelligence 10 years ago for spreading conspiracy theories about alien infiltration. He's been tracking the mirror kind ever since." "Can he be trusted?" "He's paranoid, difficult, and possibly crazy," Ven admitted. "But he knows more about the mirror kind than anyone else alive." They found Volkov in a bar on the station's lowest level. He was a thin man with wild gray hair and eyes that never stopped moving. When Thorne explained who they were and why they had come, Volkov laughed bitterly. "The Prince of New Britannia," he said. "Come to join the ranks of the crazy people who think shapeshifters are taking over the galaxy." "I saw her true face," George said quietly. "I watched her mask slip. I know what she is." Something changed in Volkov's expression. For a moment, the bitterness faded, replaced by something like hope. "Then maybe you're the one I've been waiting for," he said. "I have files, evidence, locations of infiltrators across human space, but no one would listen to a disgraced intelligence officer. They might listen to a prince." Over the next few weeks, George's small group grew. Volkov brought his network of contacts and informants. A smuggler captain named Rosa Chen joined them after revealing that her parents had been killed by infiltrators who had taken over their colony's government. Her ship, the Wandering Star, gave them the ability to move around without being tracked. The most surprising addition came from the mirror kind themselves. A defector named Kira appeared at their door one night, terrified and alone. She had abandoned the collective because she didn't believe in their plan of conquest. Unlike most mirror kind, she had developed individual thoughts and feelings. She had learned to value human life instead of just consuming it. Many in the group didn't trust her. How could they trust a shapeshifter? But Kira knew things they needed: the locations of other infiltrators, the timeline for the mirror kind's final plan, the weaknesses of the collective's communication network. George decided to give her a chance, not because he fully trusted her, but because he understood what it meant to lose everything you believed in. As months passed, they built something that looked almost like a resistance movement. They gathered evidence from across human space. They identified infiltrators in dozens of systems. They found records of people who had been replaced, families that had noticed something wrong with their loved ones but had been silenced. The picture that emerged was terrifying. The mirror kind had been working on this plan for over 100 years. They had agents in the Federation Council. They had compromised military commanders. They controlled news networks and communication systems. When they finally made their move, humanity wouldn't know what hit them. "We have to go public," George said during a planning meeting. "We have to tell everyone what's happening." "How?" Rosa asked. "The mirror kind control the main communication networks. Any message we send through official channels will be blocked or discredited." "Then we don't use official channels," George replied. "We use pirate networks, underground broadcasts, anything that the infiltrators can't control." Volkov shook his head. "Even if we get the message out, will anyone believe us? The mirror kind will say we're crazy. They'll say the evidence is fake. They've spent decades building trust and credibility. We're just a bunch of fugitives hiding on a criminal station." George thought about this for a long time. Volkov was right. Sending a message wasn't enough. They needed something that couldn't be denied, something that would force everyone to accept the truth. "We need to go back to New Britannia," he said finally. Everyone stared at him like he was insane. "That's suicide," Thorne said. "The false queen has every soldier on the planet looking for you. If you show your face there, you'll be captured or killed." "Maybe," George admitted. "But New Britannia is where it started. It's where my father discovered the truth and died for it. If I can expose the false queen in front of the whole planet, if I can force her to reveal herself, then no one will be able to deny what the mirror kind are." "How would you even get close to her?" Venn asked. George smiled grimly. "She wants me back. She's been broadcasting messages across the system, begging me to return. She says she's forgiven me for running away. She says she just wants her son to come home." "It's a trap," Rosa said. "Obviously, but sometimes the best way to defeat a trap is to walk into it on your own terms." George looked at each member of his small team. These people had risked everything to help him. They deserved honesty. "I won't lie to you. This plan is dangerous. Some of us might not survive, but if we succeed, we could save billions of lives. We could expose the greatest threat humanity has ever faced." One by one they nodded: Commander Thorne, Lieutenant Venn, Volkov, Rosa, even Kira, the defector who had more to lose than anyone. "Then let's start planning," George said. "We're going home." The night before they left Freehold, George stood alone at a viewport, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there was New Britannia. Somewhere out there was the monster who had stolen his mother's face and murdered his father. George was no longer the scared boy who had run from the palace. He was something harder now, something stronger. The universe had taken everything from him, and instead of breaking, he had learned to fight. Tomorrow, he would return to the place where his nightmare began. And one way or another, he would end it. The wandering star dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Britannia system. George stood on the bridge, looking at the familiar stars of his home. It felt like a lifetime since he had fled from here. In many ways, it was. "The planetary defense grid is scanning us," Rosa reported from the pilot's seat. "I'm broadcasting the fake identification codes Kira gave us. So far, they're holding. How long until we reach the planet? George asked. 4 hours if we don't want to attract attention. 4 hours. George had spent months preparing for this moment, but 4 hours felt like both forever and not nearly long enough. Volkov was monitoring communication channels from across the system. I've activated our network. Pirate stations, underground broadcasters, hacked satellites. When you give the signal, we'll be able to transmit to every screen on New Britannia and about 30 other worlds. The false queen is expecting you, Kira warned. Her mirror-kind senses could detect things that human instruments couldn't. I can feel her presence in the palace. She surrounded herself with guards, hundreds of them. Good, George said. I want an audience. The plan was simple but risky. George would surrender himself at the palace gates. He would demand to speak with his mother in the throne room, in front of as many people as possible. Meanwhile, his team would infiltrate the palace's communication systems and prepare to broadcast everything that happened. The hard part would be forcing the false queen to reveal herself. George would have to push her until her control slipped, until the mask fell away and everyone could see the monster underneath. If he failed, he would probably die. But if he succeeded, the truth would spread across human space like wildfire. The shuttle landed at the main palace docking platform just as the sun was setting over New Britannia. Golden light painted the crystal walls of the orbital palace. It was beautiful, George thought, beautiful and horrible at the same time. 100 soldiers were waiting for him with weapons drawn. George walked down the shuttle ramp alone, his hands raised above his head. "I've come home," he announced loudly. "Take me to my mother." The soldiers surrounded him and led him through corridors he had known his whole life. Servants and staff members stopped to stare as he passed. Word spread quickly through the palace. The lost prince had returned. The throne room was massive, designed to intimidate visitors and demonstrate the power of the royal family. Today it was filled with nobles, military officers, and government officials. They had all been summoned to witness this moment. The false queen wanted everyone to see her wayward son come crawling back. She sat on the throne at the far end of the room, dressed in royal robes that sparkled with jewels. Her face was calm and beautiful, the face of Queen Serena, the face of George's mother. But George knew what was hiding behind that face. "George," the false queen said, her voice amplified to fill the room, "my darling son, you've finally come home." George walked toward the throne. Soldiers moved to stop him, but the queen raised her hand and they stepped back. She wanted this confrontation. She wanted to humiliate him in front of everyone. "I've come home," George agreed, "but not to you." A murmur ran through the crowd. The false queen's smile flickered for just a moment. "You've been through so much," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "The pressure of your responsibilities clearly became too much, but we'll get you the help you need. We'll make sure you recover from this episode." "I'm not sick," George said. He stopped at the base of the throne and looked up at the creature wearing his mother's face. "I'm not confused. I know exactly what I'm doing." He turned to face the crowd. Hundreds of eyes stared back at him. These were the most powerful people on New Britannia. If he could convince them, if he could make them see the truth, everything would change. 18 years ago, my mother was murdered, George announced. His voice was steady and clear. "The woman sitting on that throne is not Queen Serena. She's not even human. She's a mirror-kind infiltrator who killed the real queen and took her place." The room exploded in noise, shouts of disbelief, cries of outrage, demands for George to be silenced, but George kept talking. "I have evidence. Medical scans showing that her DNA doesn't match any human pattern. Communication logs showing secret messages sent to mirror-kind space. Recordings of her speaking in their alien language." He pulled out a data crystal and held it up. "Everything is here. Everything my father discovered before she murdered him too." "This is madness," the false queen declared. She rose from her throne, her face a mask of wounded dignity. "My own son, accusing me of being an alien monster. The stress of royal duty has clearly broken his mind." "Then prove me wrong," George challenged. "Submit to a medical examination right now. Let independent doctors verify that you're human." The false queen hesitated. It was only for a moment, but George saw it, and so did some of the people watching. "I don't need to prove anything to anyone," she said coldly. "I am the queen. My word is law." "Your word is nothing," George shouted. "You are nothing but a parasite wearing stolen skin. You ate my mother's memories and wore her body like a costume. You pretended to love me while planning to enslave my entire species." The false queen's eyes narrowed. Her careful composure was starting to crack. George could see rage building behind her human mask. "Guards," she commanded, "arrest the prince. He needs medical treatment." Soldiers moved toward George, but he didn't run. Instead, he smiled. "Right now, everything that's happening in this room is being broadcast across New Britannia and 30 other human worlds. Millions of people are watching. Billions will see the recording. If you're really human, if you're really my mother, this is your chance to prove it." The false queen went very still. Her eyes flickered toward the communication panels in the walls. She could sense the active broadcasts. She knew George wasn't bluffing. "You think you're clever," she hissed. Her voice was changing, becoming layered with inhuman harmonics. "You think this little trick will save you." "Show them," George said. "Show them what you really are. Let them see the face behind the mask." "You want to see?" The false queen stepped down from her throne. With each step, her body began to change. Her skin rippled like water, her features blurred and shifted. Her fingers lengthened into claws. "Then look." The creature that had been wearing Queen Serena's face revealed its true form. Its skin became pale and translucent. Multiple eyes opened across its face. Its mouth split into mandibles designed for consumption. It was tall and thin, like a nightmare stretched into a human shape. Screams filled the throne room. People ran for the doors. Soldiers backed away in horror, their weapons forgotten. "This is what you wanted," the creature shrieked. Its voice echoed with alien hatred. "This is what you wanted everyone to see, then let them see everything." It lunged at George with impossible speed, but George was ready. Commander Thorne appeared from the crowd, weapon raised. He fired 3 shots into the creature's chest. It stumbled but didn't fall. "Did you think that would stop me?" the creature laughed. "Did you think anything could stop us? We are everywhere. In your governments, your militaries, your families. Humanity is already ours. You just didn't know it yet." But even as it spoke, something was changing in the throne room. The nobles and officials who hadn't fled were gathering their courage. They were looking at the monster and understanding, finally, what they had been ruled by all these years. "We know now," George said. "That's the point." The creature turned to face him. Rage twisted its alien features. "Then you'll die knowing," it said. "You'll all die." It charged at George again. But this time, it wasn't just Commander Thorne who stood in its way. A dozen soldiers stepped forward, their weapons raised. A dozen more joined them. And then more. Humans who had served the false queen, now understanding that their true queen had been dead for almost 2 decades. The creature was powerful, it was fast, but it was just one, and there were hundreds of humans in the throne room. Hundreds who had finally seen the truth. In the end, the creature that had murdered George's parents and stolen his childhood was brought down by the very people it had ruled. It died surrounded by the humans it had considered inferior. It died knowing that its plans had failed. After it was over, George stood in the center of the throne room, covered in alien blood. The broadcasts were still running. Across New Britannia and beyond, people were watching. People were understanding. "This is not the end," George said to the cameras, to the watching billions. The mirror kind have infiltrated positions of power across human space. Tonight, you learn the truth. Tomorrow, the real work begins. He looked around at the chaos of the throne room, at the body of the monster that had pretended to be his mother, at the soldiers and nobles who had finally chosen to fight for their species. "We will find them all," George promised. "We will expose every infiltrator. We will take back what is ours, not because we are stronger than them, not because we are smarter, but because we are human, and humans don't give up. We don't surrender. We fight until we win." The crowd that had been screaming in terror minutes ago now began to cheer. Not for the prince, not for the throne, but for the idea that humanity could face any enemy, even one wearing the faces of their loved ones, and refuse to fall. In the days that followed, George didn't take the throne. The old system had been corrupted too deeply to simply continue. Instead, he helped establish a new government built on transparency and trust. Every official submitted to testing. Every leader proved their humanity. The war against the mirror kind was just beginning. There were still infiltrators hidden across human space. There were still battles to be fought and truths to be revealed. But for the first time in decades, humanity was fighting with open eyes. They knew the face of their enemy, even when that face looked exactly like someone they loved. And they would never stop fighting until they were free. George stood at the window of the palace one last time before leaving to continue the work. Below him, New Britannia turned peacefully in the light of its sun. 3 billion people who now knew the truth. He thought about his father, who had died to uncover the conspiracy. He thought about his real mother, whose memory had been stolen and worn by a monster. "I did it," he whispered to them both. "I finished what you started." Then he turned away from the window and walked toward his future. There was still so much work to do. But humanity was awake now, and they would never sleep again.